Good morning. Thanks very much for coming in here. I know there's a lot of hungover people that couldn't make it and maybe some hungover people that could. Really appreciate it. I'd like to thank my employer who does not know anything about this talk and may not approve of it when they find out. My employer is VMware and they are a pretty nice place to work, but I'm about to do something that they may not like. Here's why I'm doing this. That's my son Leo. He is helpless, and I think that the helpless need to be protected, and that the people doing that protection need to do their job correctly. So here's the first insight I had. Every security measure is in some threat model, somewhere. Could be the explicit threat model. I don't know if you can quite see the print there. And in the explicit threat model, you do good practices like Schneier's security wheel. This is thanks to Bruce Schneier. All comes from him. I may have distorted some of it in the interest of this talk. So the first question, what assets are we trying to protect? What are the risks to those assets? How well does the security measure mitigate those risks? What other risks does the security measure cause? What costs and trade-offs does the security measure impose? And of course, the ever popular lather, rinse, and repeat, because you have to keep doing this. You can't just stop at some point. So then we have a different security model or threat model. This is the implicit threat model, and it can frequently dwarf the explicit threat model that we've made. The implicit security model is one where things just sort of float around randomly and nobody really looks into them and nobody really tests them, and as a result, as with any other system of thought that has no way of rejecting falsehood, it becomes filled with falsehood and just, stuff. Like security theater, also known as ludicrous bullshit. Okay? This creates a huge risk. The risk is that people who are tasked with doing security, and that's everybody in the organization, suddenly feel that security is burdensome, that it's onerous, that it's pointless, and they take steps to work around their security for any reason or none. So if it's convenient, you SSH-R out without a password. Anybody done this to do their job? Anybody still awake? Okay. Yeah, the rest of you have just not had it happen yet. But it will. Anyway, the problem is that when you have security measures which are sort of universally seen as ludicrous bullshit, you have this problem where you've created trusted attackers, and that's the worst kind because they already have accesses inside your perimeter. And this is exactly the worst thing that you can have in a security system. So I could carp about this all day. I probably shouldn't and definitely won't. I'd like to talk about how to fix this problem. So, number one, bring every security measure into the explicit model. If you don't have an explicit model, that's, I guess, number 0. You want to do this a little bit at a time and figure out how the system is adapted. You have this thing they call a complex adaptive system. I'm not going to go into it here. You can like Wikipedia it or something and find out what that all entails. It's a very freighted phrase. So basically you want to just make small adjustments at a time and watch how the system has adjusted itself because it will, and it will do so in ways that you cannot predict in advance. So number two, ensure every measure, every security measure addresses at least one credible threat that is also in your threat model. It has to do that. Number three, review the threat model regularly. Right? It can't just be static. It can't just be sort of wholly carved into granite. It's got to be a living, dynamic document. Number four, engage the widest possible audience in the review. This is one of the parts that's going to make me unpopular, because up till now, security has been the province of a tiny, jealous priesthood. And this is exactly what it must not be in order to be effective. Everybody has to be bought in. Everybody has to have a say. Everybody has to be able to poke up their hand and say, hey, this is stupid. Why are we doing this? And if they can't get a reasonable answer, action has to be taken on that. And as you might have guessed, the next step is remove measures that no longer fit the current security model, right? Because they have to, yes?
Can you tell the governments and the airlines about this, please?
The question is, can I tell the governments and the airlines about this? And the answer is absolutely I will, and I'm starting here today.
Just don't do it in the airport.
No, well, you know, there's a time and a place for everything, and you know, protests can be more or less effective depending on where and when you do it and what you set up in advance. Yeah, I have gotten very thoroughly searched at the airport for making an offhand comment. This is the kind of security measure that I think needs bright, loud exposure. Anyway, so anyone want to guess what the next step is? Anybody? That's right! Lather, rinse, repeat. Because it has to keep going and going and going. This is a dynamic, living system. Your threat model is, your organization is, you are. So here it is. Security is everybody's job. We have to make sure that it can be everybody's job and that there are mechanisms in place to see to it that everybody can do their job. Questions? Comments? Straitjackets? We've got some time yet. No?
How do we get this message?
How do we get this message to the right people? I think it starts off with contacting the people who are in charge of security in your organization and asking them where they keep their threat model. And that opens up the question of, well, where is that threat model? Do we have one? There is a government agency for my country. It's called the Transportation Security Agency, and they have explicitly said that they don't model threats. Of course, the next step when you hear a thing like that is to contact your representatives in government, because this is a ludicrous bullshit assertion for a very expensive and, as far as I can tell, totally useless entity. You're right, it has made money for people, but I think that should be in there. You know, they should explicitly mention that Michael Chertoff is the principal beneficiary of this BS. Yes? Anything else? All right. Do I want to explain how I'm going to do my protest? Well, I haven't entirely fleshed this out, but the first thing I want to do is make people aware of the first cut at the solution as I see it, and see if I can get more people to agree that that is the right thing, or to, you know, to give constructive criticism and help, help shape a thing that is the right thing. Next step after that, of course, is to get out to relatively small organizations where a suggestion like this could quickly fly, right? Because you don't want to start with, oh, NATO or something. That's just, you know, I'm already tilting hard enough at the windmills here. So start small, work up, you know, take lessons from what you've done at the smaller scale and push it to the larger scale. This is kind of how FOSDEM happened, isn't it? Yes?
The more people you bring into making decisions about your security model, the more likely you have a bad actor who's trying to subvert it within that group. How do you fight that?
The question was what to do about bad actors trying to subvert the model. Well, that's already a problem. I think that bad actors are drawn to this sort of place anyway. They try to get in the smaller group, and they'd have more influence in the smaller group. You know, the security group attracts bad actor the way honey attracts flies. You know, it's so it's already a problem, and I think it becomes less of a problem as some bad actor can't act in secret and do stuff in secret. Does that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I'm here for the rest of the day. I would like to thank Meredith Patterson, who helped me realize that this wasn't just sort of an offhand thought, as I'm prone to have once in a while. And I'd like to thank Devdas Bhagat, who turned me on to these complex adaptive systems and made me realize that this is even a bigger thing than I had previously imagined it was. Thank you very much.